Will, let me ask you, because, you know, albeit we like to think that we're all original thinkers, as I was touching upon, these discussions have been around for a long time. And, you know, I love what I know about your course. I love the depth of the course that you're doing with subject leaders. And I'm really, you know, delighted that it's clearly proving to be popular. And you only got to see the very complimentary, positive comments on Twitter to see that you're definitely connecting to your audience. But why do you think, and I don't know how we relate and compare to other subjects, but do you think PE is particularly resistant to change, and why, if it is?
I think yes and no. So again, I can only speak at length about the system here in England. Again, I've been really lucky over the last year and more engaging internationally with people and hearing and understanding what goes on elsewhere. But certainly here, we've got a system of academisation. We've got a pretty succinct national curriculum that fits, it would fit on a postage stamp if you really wanted to get it on there. But it's very fragmented, isn't it? So we've got, you know, some incredible practice that's going on, but we've also got some awful practice. But I wonder if part of that resistance to change is not so much a resistance, it's an ignorance about whether change is needed. So again, I count myself in this. I was barely successful as a sports performer. I did a sports science degree that led me into not picking up PE as a PGC because I didn't know what else to do. I actually picked it up because I was doing an awful lot of coaching at that moment, and coaching in rugby and squash and tennis only really gets you to the privileged kids, and I wanted to get to the rest. So I actively chose teaching as a career. But I think the vast majority of PE teachers, I don't know the numbers, have gone that route of a degree and a one-year top-up to become a teacher. They step into that role having only ever loved sports, having only ever known sports, not really knowing a lot about child development, or they know about sports psychology, but do they know about, you know, behavioural science and influencing people's minds? So I don't think there's an intentional thing there, but you can't help but keep giving back what worked for you. And maybe it was that bad experience of cricket and football from my PE teacher that I had that helped me go, how do I lose my natural lens and look at this from a different perspective? And it's really hard to do that, isn't it? I also think, so the unique bit I think to PE is also, we're maybe more competitive, territorial and defensive than anyone else I know. And we're also resilient. So it's great when there's stuff going on that the team pulls together, and the PE department, you know, I've seen mergers of schools where there's the English department from that school and the English department from that school. They've both lost half their staff and they sit at opposite ends of the room and don't talk. The PE room still has its banter, and they've merged, come to terms with it. It's the new team selection and they've got on. But they also can't help but zip up their suit of armour trying to defend their territory. And I don't know if it's that mantra that those who can do, those who can't teach, those who can't teach PE, those who can't teach PE teach the teachers. Like you and I were at the bottom of the pyramid, but the big bit I try to do is get people to take the suit of armour off. Let's stop defending the subject because we believe it's great, and start to look at it through the critical eye of someone that doesn't believe it's great. And what is it that they're seeing that I can't see yet? And how do I see that? Whether that's a student, you know, my early career, I thought success as a PE teacher was the people that now make me feel old. They're the heads of PE in my local schools that for some crazy reason have come back to Nottingham to be in my net. There's 3 of them, the buggers. So they make me feel really old. And in my first 10 years of teaching, for me, that was success. But looking back, all that is it makes me feel old. And they were probably already on that pathway. The children that were PE refusers when I picked them up in year 9 or year 10 when they changed to my class. And I managed to get them to smile for the first time, to bring their kit, to come on a residential trip away, and to have that moment of this isn't all bad. They were my real successes, I think, as a teacher. So I think what I'm trying to do with the PE profession, or the custodians of PE right now, is helping them go. And this is great, isn't it? Lots of them do want to change. So the positive is there's an awful lot of PE teachers out there who have stepped back from it. Again, COVID has really helped with that, to step back and go, I work bloody hard, but is it making a real difference? Is it making a difference where the difference is needed most? Yeah. And if it's not, how can I work smarter? What could I do differently? Rather than being so busy as an operator in the bubble with the teams, the clubs, the fixtures, the school accountability measures that only value the 10% of your kids that do GCSE PE. Those things narrow your gaze into the stuff that probably doesn't change lives.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's lots of reasons why we're a bit resistant to change. And educate, you've only got to look at the late Sir Ken Robinson's talks. Education is resistant to change, and PE is a part of that. But that's not, I'm really optimistic, and I think change is coming. I think it's happening. I don't doubt in 20 years' time when we sit down, sorry, you said 30, I'm only 20 years in the game. But when we double our time, these conversations probably will be going around again. But what PE needed to be 30 years ago is different to what it needs to be in your inner city London context today, to my Nottinghamshire, this school or that school context today, and will be very different to what it needs to be, or what it needs to provide to help children become better humans. Like that's what I want it to be, or happier humans.
Yeah. What a lovely answer. So much there to delve into. And, I think I'll probably keep the bar a little bit lower. I just want to be able to walk in. I've spent 14 years in a very privileged position of supporting trainee teachers. And as a result, I go and work, I used to go and work and observe lessons and talk about lessons, and which I get, is not everybody's absolute drive of other people. They might have things like career prospects or, a million and one other things that would get in the way of what you actually do with these year 9s in this lesson. But my bar was a little bit lower towards the end. I just wanted to go in and see a lesson that didn't look like the one that I had when I was a kid at school. And, and what sparked that, or one of the things that really got me thinking about that, was as a parent, when my kids were in primary school, and the school they went to used to do this session for parents looking at what we would call pedagogical approaches to maths. And I used to sit there thinking, blimey, this is really different. Like, even the way you lay out the sum, it goes across the page, not down the page. And I used to walk home thinking, someone's actually really thought about what's the best way to get a young person to learn mathematics. And there's lots of great thinking, lots of great research in our subject area, but it doesn't shape teaching and learning in the way that mathematics changes have done. And so, I regularly used to ask, especially primary teachers, well, actually primary and secondary, how many lessons did you teach this week that were different to the way you were taught PE, in any way? And you mentioned, models-based learning. I used to find it really sad that in the first few weeks of PGCE, my trainees used to talk to us about new ways of doing stuff, because we're looking at game-based pedagogy. And it's like, when I was doing my degree, with QTS, we were introduced to teaching games for understanding. Actually, I think 1982, that was, I wasn't studying in 1982, but it was published. I was like, there's nothing new.
No, I think they did it in 78. I think you've stolen 4 years.
I think you could trace it. You could trace it back a little bit earlier into the 60s as well, some games-based learning. But it's not new, though.
It's not new. no, but it's needed. I similarly, this summer just gone, couldn't wait to go into a school and not see the bloody long barrier in cricket. I mean, A, I think it's an irrelevant skill, but B, if we want to inspire healthy, active, happy, able children, and I'd like to think those trainees were trying to impress me on the day that I bothered to go in, is that really what you choose? Yeah. So yeah. Anyway,
So
let me throw a question back at you, because I like your comparison to maths, and one of the advantages I feel I've had is through a whole school teaching and learning role, seeing other subjects and digging deep into other subjects has really helped me again be critical of my subject. And is maybe that great maths teaching that's really moved on is because great maths teaching is not in a silo, but it's in a space of its own. Whereas great teaching PE versus great coaching that we see everywhere else, again, I used to have a bit of snobbery around teachers versus coaches, which I've learned that there's awful of both that exist in the world. But where would you put your difference between teaching and coaching? And do you think that dynamic, again, dilutes the ability for it to move forwards, and maths doesn't have that challenge?
So there's two things: the difference between maths teaching and teaching in PE, sport, whatever we're calling it, and then difference between teaching and coaching. So taking the first one first, I again read a really topical sort of point of conversation in recent years. I think PE, from what I can work out, is the only subject where the express universal goal is essentially to promote a certain type of behaviour, a certain type of lifestyle. Now, I think an English teacher would be bothered that kids love the written word. And there would be maths teachers who do talk about the beauty of and the aesthetics of maths. But essentially, both of those subjects, in fact, all other subjects, the end goal is to get the kids through their exams, to open doors and let them then go on and lead their lives, especially with maths and English. I'm not sure that that's our end goal. In fact, I'm very sure that it's not our end goal. And it goes back to who needs us.
Do you think that's the English teacher's reason for getting out of bed or for signing up?
No, I don't.
That's not their end goal.
No, but because, and it goes back to your point of, are we, there's lots of points here, but are we educating for kids to be equipped to function? They have to get through maths and English. There's no doubt. In the current system, they have to.
It's an interim gate, isn't it? It's an interim gate that you have to get open.
Yeah, and that's actually become, with EBAC, you actually have to get GCSEs to go wherever you want to go. So that's shaped the working patterns and the working priorities. I've got no doubt, and in fact, my partner's an English teacher, that she went into that because she wanted to pass on her love of literature. And I also think we're really mistaken if we think it's either or. I think if you pass on that passion for a subject area, the kids will actually get the exam results. I think it starts with loving this subject, loving learning in the subject, knowing how to learn in the subject. You will get the results at the end. It's like, it's the classic All Blacks. If you focus on the process, you're going to get the results. If you focus on the result, you probably won't get what you want to get. So I don't think it's necessarily that either or, but I think our goal is really quite distinct, because every policy document I've ever looked at talks about what's essentially a behaviour, lifelong participation, healthy active learning, whatever you want to call it. It's a behaviour outcome. And you flagged up before about what's included on teacher education. Well, I've become absolutely fascinated with what's sometimes referred to as behaviour economics or behaviour change theories, because really that's what we're trying to do. And that all starts, from what I can understand, it all starts with, and you mentioned Tim and Deirdre's work around meaningfulness. It starts with that, finding that connection. I was just reading stuff on resilience, which is, of course, is a huge buzzword in education at the moment. And the author was saying, you can't have resilience if you don't connect to the thing you're meant to be resilient in. You can't tell a kid to keep practicing that overhead serve if they don't find any meaning in it, because why would they? So, I think that's a really interesting question. And teaching versus coaching, well, going back to our previous conversation around PISA or spam, like now I just very black and white with it. I think if you're an adult and you're working with young people in any movement context, then the only valid goal is on that enthusiasm, retention, wanting them to do more piece, whether you're a squash coach, swim coach, or you're teaching PE in a secondary school or wherever. That's the only goal. So I'm not sure.
And I think in the past, though, there would have been an argument for, no, I'm educating, there's more to, and I'm trying to develop those life skills. I talk about the priceless skills that you get from PE.
Yeah.
But actually, they're the things that make you be a better human. And if you talk to the top coaches these days, you listen to Gareth Southgate, he wants to make better humans. So when done well, coaching is also teaching.
Absolutely. Especially
when done badly, teaching is less than coaching.
Yeah, no, completely. And, again, without wishing to go through like tales from the old, an old PE teacher, it's not really where I want to go. But certainly, when we entered the profession, there was, again, it probably was a snobbery that within PE, there was much more holistic, progressive thoughts than there were in sports coaching. And during the course of my career, I think I could now say that it absolutely switched. So some of the coaching material that's coming out of the main governing bodies, the youth review by the FA, child first rugby by the RFU, and every governing body had their inclusive approach, modified games approach. The ECB have got some wonderful materials. And I think the really progressive stuff in the last 15 years has come from coaching, or whether it happens on the field or not is another story. But
and unfortunately, in coaching, it's similar to in teaching. We tend to find our best practitioners climbing the ranks and doing less of where they're needed most. If Gareth Southgate really is, and I do believe he's a great leader and coach and manager, and yes, he can have impact to a bigger audience through what he does with the England team, but maybe those talents are needed more at his local youth under sixes. We need to flip the where we put our resource. I used to timetable my best PE teachers on examination PE classes. They didn't need to be there. They needed to be on year 7, disengaged, demotivated, not currently doing. But actually that was a whole different type of best PE teacher. And I guess that's what I'd like us to get more of within the profession, is people with that as their ambition, but also that as their skill set. Because it's not necessarily the same skill set as I know the correct techniques and the best practices for these top 20 sports.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, there's lots there. We were only meant to be recording a 15-minute chat.
No, stop.
I'm going to thank you really so much for a really interesting chat. I hope people listening to it found it as interesting as me.